Most of the time when I tell Appalachian horror stories, I'm talking about things that don't have names. Things in the forest that move wrong, sounds that come from the wrong direction, lights that follow, presences that press against the membrane between what we know and what we don't. But tonight is different. Tonight is about people. And I want to be honest about something that the people in these three stories already know from living it. Human beings in isolated places can be more frightening than anything the mountains themselves produce, because a presence in the dark that you can't explain has unknown intentions. But a person in a specific place saying specific things, showing you specific knowledge they shouldn't have, a person you can start to understand. And what these three people understood in the Appalachians, alone and in the middle of nowhere with the nearest help, a very long drive away, was something they needed to get away from immediately. All three of them got away. All three of them made the right calls. And all three of them are still living with the specific chill of understanding, just barely in time, what was in front of them. Three stories, real people, real mountains, real danger. Let's go. I want to tell you about the moment I understood what was happening, because there was a specific moment, a specific sentence he said, where everything I'd been half registering as odd assembled itself into something clear and terrible. And I want you to feel that moment the way I felt it, which means I need to build up to it the way it built up for me. So I'm going to tell this in order, because the order is everything. My name is Kelsey. I'm 31. I've been hiking solo for 6 years, long sections of the AT, serious backcountry work, the kind of hiking that requires planning and experience and a specific comfort level with being alone in remote terrain. I'm not reckless. I tell people where I'm going. I carry communication. I've been doing this long enough to have good instincts about trail situations. My instincts told me something was wrong about 30 minutes into the conversation. It took me another hour to understand exactly how wrong. This was a 5-day section in the Central Virginia AT, early September, a section I'd researched thoroughly. I'd parked at the northern trailhead and was hiking south. I was on day 2, making good miles. The trail running along a series of ridges with outstanding views and limited tree cover. I met him at a viewpoint. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a rock, no pack visible, which I noted. He said hello. I said hello back, the standard trail greeting. He asked how my trip was going. I said, well, I'd had good weather. I was making good time. He said, where'd you start? Standard trail conversation. I told him the northern trailhead. He nodded. He said, parking up there's not great. Hope your car's okay. I said it should be fine. It was a small lot, but I'd found a good spot. He said, the gray one near the kiosk? I looked at him. I said, how do you know what my car looks like? He said, oh, I drove past the trailhead a couple days ago. Saw a gray car at the kiosk. Figured it was a hiker's. Plausible. But I hadn't told him my car was gray. I'd said I found a good spot near the kiosk. I hadn't mentioned the color. I noted it. I filed it. I kept the conversation level. He asked where I was planning to camp that night. I gave a vague answer. Somewhere around mile marker 40-something. I'd see how I felt. He nodded and said, the shelter at 43 is good this time of year. Not too crowded in September. I said I'd probably tent. I preferred tenting. He said solo hikers usually do, more flexibility. He said solo hikers, not you. Not you seem like you'd prefer tenting. Not personalized to what I told him. Solo hikers. He knew I was solo before I'd said anything about hiking alone. The conversation continued for maybe 15 minutes. He was friendly, easy talking, the kind of person who seems completely comfortable in any interaction. He asked good trail questions. He talked about the terrain ahead with familiarity, nothing obviously alarming. But I was counting the gray car, the solo status, the assumption about my tenting preference before I'd said it. 3 data points he had that I hadn't given him. I said I needed to keep moving. I wanted to make my miles before the light changed. He said, you've got time. You started early this morning. I said, how do you know when I started? He said, the kiosk register. You signed in at 6:15. I had signed the register at 6:15 a.m. That was accurate. The register was at the trailhead parking lot I'd left my car at. He'd been at my trailhead. He'd read my register entry. He'd seen my car. He knew I was solo from the register. One name, no group. I kept my voice and my face completely level. I said, "Getting a late start today myself." He said, "You'll be fine. The shelter at 43 is only 4 miles. You'll have hours of daylight." He still thought I was going to the shelter at 43. I had not told him that. I had given a vague answer about mile marker 40-something. He had filled in the shelter at 43 from his own knowledge of where I'd be camping. Either he'd been tracking my pace and calculated where I'd realistically end up, or he already knew my planned itinerary. I'd left a printed itinerary in my car. Standard safety practice, I always leave a copy in the glove box with my planned route and campsites in my locked car at the trailhead that he'd been to. I said goodbye warmly, the way you say goodbye to someone on trail, and I walked away from the viewpoint at a pace slightly faster than my natural pace, but not so fast that it was visible. I walked for 40 minutes without stopping. Then I pulled off trail at a point where I had sight lines in both directions, sat on a boulder, and thought carefully about everything he'd said. Gray car near the kiosk, solo hiker, started 6:15, camping at 43. All accurate, all information I hadn't given him, all information that was in or near my car at the trailhead, 1 locked car, and 4 accurate data points. I called my emergency contact from my satellite communicator. I described the encounter, the specific details, the information he'd had. She said, "Kelsey, alter your route. Don't camp where your itinerary says." I said, "I know." She said, "Right now. Change where you're going tonight." I said, "I'm already working on it." I altered my route significantly, camped at a location not on my itinerary, a spot that wasn't in any documentation. I'd left at the trailhead. I did not see him again. I exited a day early, changed my exit point, came out at a trailhead I hadn't planned to use. 3 days later, my emergency contact drove to the original exit trailhead to retrieve my car. She called me when she got there. She said, "Your car is here, it's fine." Then she said, "Kelsey." I said, "What?" She said, "There's a piece of paper under your windshield wiper." My stomach dropped. She said, "It says, hope the rest of the trip was good." That was all. Hope the rest of the trip was good. He'd been back to the trailhead. After our conversation on the trail, he'd gone back to where my car was parked, and he'd left a note to show me he'd been there, to show me he'd known where my car was the whole time, and that he'd chosen to leave a note instead of whatever else he could have done. I still don't know what he wanted from that conversation on the ridge. I don't know if he was watching to see whether I'd go where my itinerary said. I don't know if he was planning to be at the shelter at 43 when a solo female hiker arrived. What I know is that my emergency contact is the reason I'm here telling this story instead of a different story being told about me. And I know that the note under the windshield wiper was a message, not a threat, just a message saying, "I knew where you were. I knew where your car was. I know where you ended up. And I chose to leave a note." That choice, made by someone else, is not something I'm willing to rely on again. I don't hike solo anymore. I know that's not the empowering ending. I know what I gave up, but I also know what I almost gave up. And only one of those things is something I can get back. Hey, before story 2, this is the kind of content I think matters not just for the scare, but because the people in these stories made choices that kept them safe, and those choices are worth paying attention to. Hit subscribe right now. Every week more of this, real encounters from real people, and drop a comment telling me what you would have done when he mentioned the gray car. That was the moment right there. Would you have caught it? Story 2 is about finding a campfire that shouldn't have been there, and the person sitting at it who knew they shouldn't be there, and what they did about being found. I want to start with what we should have done differently, because I've thought about this a lot in the 18 months since it happened, and the answer is we should have turned around the moment we saw the smoke. Not because smoke is inherently threatening, not because illegal camping is the worst thing a person can do, but because in a section of backcountry that was documented as having no permitted campers, smoke means someone is there who isn't supposed to be there. And someone in a remote location who isn't supposed to be there has made a specific choice to be difficult to find. That choice is information. We didn't process the information correctly the first time. By the third encounter, we had processed it completely. and we were already moving. My name is Marin. I'm 34. Rolf is my partner. We've been camping together for 7 years. Serious backcountry work in the southern Appalachians. The section was a wilderness area in western North Carolina, a permit-required zone with limited entry. We had our permits. We knew approximately how many other groups were in the area because the ranger station tracks that. 0 other groups were permitted in our section on those dates. We saw the smoke on day 2, mid-morning, from a ridge that gave us a view down into a creek drainage below. Smoke, campfire smoke, from a section of drainage that should be empty. Rolf said, "Someone's down there," I said, "without a permit." He said, "Maybe they have one, and we just don't know about it." I said, "The ranger station said 0 other groups on these dates in this section." He said, "We should report it when we get out." He was right about that. Where we went wrong was deciding to investigate before reporting. We descended into the drainage. The camp was at a flat section of creek bank, well established, not a first-time setup. The fire ring had been used many times, the stones blackened far beyond what 1 or 2 nights of use produces. Someone had been camping in this drainage repeatedly, the kind of repeat use that the wilderness permit system exists specifically to prevent. A man was at the camp. I'll describe him the way I'd describe anyone. Medium height, 40 seconds. Outdoor clothing, functional rather than recreational. The clothing of someone who spends real time outside rather than someone who gears up for a trip. No pack visible, no vehicle camping equipment either. He watched us come into the clearing. He did not look surprised. He looked at us the way you look at something you were expecting. He said, "Morning." Rolf said, "Hey, didn't know anyone was out here." The man said, "Just passing through." I looked at the fire ring, the many times used stones, the established camp. He was not passing through. He said, "Where you headed?" Rolf gave a general answer. I said nothing. I was looking at the camp setup, the fire ring, a tarp strung between 2 trees with bedding beneath it, the specific quality of a space someone had been using for a long time. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. We said we'd see him around. We walked back up to the ridge. Rolf said, "He's been living there." I said, "For a while by the look of it." Rolf said, "That's his territory." I said, "Yes." We talked about what to do. We decided to stay on plan. Our camp was a mile up the drainage from his. We had permits. We had every right to be there. We'd report it when we got out. We went to our camp. At approximately 4 p.m., the man came by our campsite, not through our campsite, past it, on the trail that ran along the ridge above our camp, visible from where we were sitting. He was walking, heading in the direction we'd come from. He looked down at us. He raised a hand. We raised hands back. He kept walking. I want to tell you what that second encounter meant and why it changed my assessment. He had come to our campsite, not to our camp, on the trail above it, but he'd walked from his established location a mile down the drainage to our location. He'd confirmed where we were camped, and he'd let us see him do it. Not incidentally. The hand raise was deliberate. He wanted us to know he'd been to our camp. He wanted us to know he knew where we were. I said to Rolf quietly after the man had passed, "He came up here on purpose." Rolf said, "To check on us." I said, "To let us know he checked on us." Rolf thought about that. He said, "There's a difference." I said, "Yes. The difference is checking on us is information gathering. Letting us know he checked on us is communication. It's a message. The message was, I know where you are. We made dinner and kept the fire going and talked about whether to stay or go." Rolf's position was that we had permits, he had none. If there was a conflict, we were the ones withstanding. We weren't going to be driven out of permitted wilderness by someone camping illegally. My position was that the message he'd sent was specific and deliberate, and that whoever he was, whatever he was doing in an established, undocumented camp in permitted wilderness, he'd made a point of communicating that he knew our position. I said, "If the only message is, I know where you are, what's the implied rest of the message?" Rolf didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "And I'm deciding what to do with that." I said, "Yes, we went to sleep with that hanging there." At 2:30 a.m., Rolf shook me awake. He said quietly, "He's in the tree line." I lay still. The fire had burned down. We'd left it low intentionally. In the low firelight, at the edge of the camp, in the trees on the south side, a shape, still, present, watching. I don't know how long he'd been there. I don't know what he was doing. What I know is that at 2:30 a.m., the man from the drainage had come to the edge of our campsite and was standing in the trees watching us sleep. We did not acknowledge that we saw him. We lay still. After approximately 10 minutes, the shape moved away into the trees. We heard nothing. But we felt a specific change in the air when the watching stopped. We packed in the dark. Not fast, not panicked, but efficient and quiet. By 4:15 a.m., we were moving. We hiked out in the dark with headlamps 4 miles to the trailhead, moving at a pace that covered the distance in 2 hours. We reported everything to the ranger station when it opened. A ranger team went into the drainage that day. They found the camp. They found evidence of extended occupation, weeks at minimum. They found no person. He'd been gone before they arrived. They removed what he'd left. The ranger I spoke with said, "Did he make any direct threat?" I said, "No direct threat." The ranger said, "Just proximity?" I said, "Just proximity and communication." The ranger was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You made the right call leaving when you did." He said it in a specific tone, not reassuring, confirming. The tone of someone who knows what that situation can become if the calls are made differently. He said people who establish those camps in wilderness areas aren't always there for camping. I said, "I know." He said, "You made the right call 3 times. He said it 3 times. I've thought about that a lot. Why 3 times? What he was telling me by saying it 3 times. What happens in those drainages when the calls aren't made right? Rolf and I are still together, still camping, still in the Appalachians. We don't make unplanned visits to unknown smoke anymore. Some information you only need to learn once. I want to tell you up front that he fixed the car, because that's the strange part, the part that made it so hard to explain afterward. He wasn't incompetent to help. The help was real. The car was genuinely fixed. I drove home on it without any further problem. He was exactly what he appeared to be on the surface. A man who stopped to help a woman broken down on a mountain road. Except that underneath the help, there was something else. Knowledge he shouldn't have had. Behavior that was wrong in ways I struggled to name while it was happening and could name very clearly once it was over. And the thing Glenn found when he went back to that road 2 days later, that confirmed everything I'd felt and hadn't been able to prove. My name is Tisha. I'm 42. Glenn is my husband. This happened about 2 years ago. I'd been visiting a college friend who lives in the Virginia mountains, a 2-day trip. I was driving home on a Saturday afternoon on a state route through the mountains that I'd used several times before. The route runs through some remote country. There's a long section of maybe 20 miles where you're in mountain terrain without a cell signal, small communities but not close. The kind of road where if something goes wrong, you're working with what you have. About 10 miles into that remote section, my tire blew. Not a slow leak, a full blowout. The wheel lurching, I controlled it and got to the shoulder cleanly. The kind of situation I've handled before. I know how to change a tire. Except the spare was flat. I hadn't checked it before the trip. I know better. I simply hadn't checked it. I sat in my car on the shoulder of a mountain road with no cell signal, a blown tire, a flat spare, and this specific sinking feeling of someone who has done everything right for years and made the one mistake that matters. He pulled up behind me within 10 minutes. A pickup truck, clean, local plates, a man, maybe 50, medium build, work clothing. He got out and said he saw the flat, asked if I needed help. I said I had a flat spare, which was the problem. He said he had a compressor in the truck, could try to get enough air in the spare to limp to the next town. Standard roadside assistance behavior. Exactly what someone stopping to help would do. I said thank you. He got the compressor. I changed to the spare while he aired it. We worked alongside each other for maybe 15 minutes. Normal conversation. Where was I headed? Had I been to this area before? That sort of thing. I told him I'd been visiting a friend, gave the general direction I was headed, didn't specify. He nodded. Then he said, "Long drive back from the mountains on a Saturday, your friend in Thornton?" I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Thornton, the community up on the North Ridge. A lot of people visit up there." I had been visiting a friend in Thornton. I had not mentioned Thornton. I had said I'd been visiting a friend in the Virginia mountains. He'd named my friend's community. I kept my voice level. I said, "Not far from there." He nodded again, continued with the compressor. A few minutes later, he said, "You came down the North Ridge Road this morning?" The North Ridge Road was the road from Thornton. I had taken the North Ridge Road. I had not mentioned the North Ridge Road. I had not mentioned any road. I said something like that. He said, "Good road. Better than the 612 this time of year." The 612 was the alternate route from Thornton that I had specifically not taken because I'd been told it was worse in rain, and there'd been rain earlier in the week. He knew the two routes from Thornton. He knew which one I'd chosen. He knew I'd come from the North Ridge. He knew Thornton, how the spare was holding enough air. He said it would get me to the next town easily. There was a service station about 8 miles on. He said, "You'll want to call ahead. They close at 5 on Saturdays." I checked the clock, 3:40 p.m. I said, "How far is it?" He said, 8 miles, you'll be fine if you don't stop. He said, "If you don't stop," with a specific emphasis. And I thought about that emphasis and what it meant, if you don't stop. As if stopping between here and there was a thing I might do and a thing he was advising me against. As if he knew what was between here and there on that road. I thanked him. I got in the car. I drove without stopping. I got to the service station at 4:52, 8 minutes before they closed. I called Glenn from the service station phone while they replaced the tire. I described the encounter. He listened to all of it. He said, "He named Thornton." I said, "Yes." He said, "Without you saying it." I said, "Yes." He said, "And the North Ridge Road." I said, "Yes." He said, "How would he know those things?" I said, "I've been thinking about that for the last hour." Glenn said, "Did you see him before, on the road, before the blowout?" I thought about the drive. I thought about a truck I'd noted in my rearview mirror on the North Ridge Road. Same color, same profile. He'd been behind me, on the road from Thornton. He'd followed me to the breakdown point, or he'd seen me at the breakdown point after following me and stopped. Either way, he'd been behind me on the road from Thornton, which is how he knew the road I'd taken, which is how he knew the community I'd come from. He'd been following me. Glenn drove out to that road the following Monday. He drove the full section. He was looking for something specific. I told him about the "if you don't stop" emphasis, about the stretch of 8 miles between the breakdown point and the service station. He found it about 4 miles from the breakdown point. A pull-off, gravel, in a section of the mountain road with no houses, no businesses, dense forest on both sides. At the pull-off, tread marks, recent. A truck had parked there, and hung from a tree at the edge of the pull-off, visible from the road, a hand-lettered cardboard sign, "Flat tire, help ahead." A sign directing broken-down drivers off the main road into the trees to a pull-off where a truck had been parked recently. I've thought about what the sign was for. I've thought about what the plan was. If the spare had been too flat to hold air, if I'd needed more help, if I'd followed the "if you don't stop" advice in the wrong direction. I've thought about the 8 miles between the breakdown point and the service station, and where those 8 miles would have taken me if I'd stopped at a pull-off with a helpful sign. I've thought about how many times that sign had worked, how many broken down drivers had followed it. Glenn took the sign down and photographed it and reported it to the county sheriff. The sheriff said they'd look into it. I don't know what happened after that. I know what almost happened on a Saturday afternoon on a mountain road in Virginia, and I know that the man who fixed my tire, who was competent and pleasant and helped me get safely to the service station, had a sign in the trees 4 miles up the road. Just in case the first approach didn't work, 3 encounters in the Appalachians. A man at a ridge viewpoint who knew which car was hers, when she'd started, and where her itinerary said she'd be sleeping, and who left a note on her windshield to make sure she understood that he'd been back to her car. A man in a creek drainage who'd made an established camp in wilderness that wasn't his, who'd walked a mile to let them see him check their location, and who was standing in the tree line watching them sleep at 2:30 a.m. And a man who fixed a tire on a remote mountain road while revealing knowledge he could only have from following her, and who had a sign in the trees 4 miles away just in case the help at the roadside wasn't enough. Here's what I want to say about these 3 stories, and I want to say it directly because These aren't ghost stories, and they don't get a haunted closing. All three of these people got away because they trusted the specific feeling that something was wrong before they had the proof that it was wrong. Kelsey trusted the gray car moment. Maren and Rolf trusted the message in the deliberate hand raise. Tisha trusted the feeling in "if you don't stop," even though it was delivered by a man who was genuinely helping her. They all had moments where they could have rationalized away the feeling, gray car, I didn't mention the color, but maybe he just guessed. He came by our camp, but he's just curious about other hikers. He mentioned Thornton, but maybe it was a reasonable guess. And in all three cases, they didn't rationalize. They held the feeling, kept moving, got out, and found out afterward that the feeling was right. That's the whole story. Trust the feeling that something is wrong before you can prove it is. In the Appalachians and everywhere else, stay safe. Good night.